A week had passed since the storm returned. The first few days were worse than expected, harsher even than before the brief break. The winds howled relentlessly, and visibility had dropped to nearly nothing. But inside the cabin, Lauren and Mira remained content. After 3 days of brutal weather, the wind finally began to ease, and the heavy snowfall softened into steady, lighter flurries. The temperature, however, remained well below freezing. Mira sat at the counter, her laptop open, the faint signal flickering in and out as the video call struggled to hold while she spoke with her publisher, Robert Mullin. Robert's face appeared on the screen. The screen was grainy and lagging, but he seemed calm, with only a hint of tension in his eyes. Behind him, light from the floor to ceiling window cast long shadows across his clearly expensive apartment. "How are you, Robert?" she asked kindly. "We're hanging in there," Robert replied tiredly. "The building has a sturdy generator, so we've managed to hold on to power, though there are rolling blackouts about every other day." "Do you have enough food?" "We did, until this second wave came along. We're almost out now, but they've got the Red Cross and National Guard running daily supply drops," he said, rubbing his forehead. "Food, water. Basics. It's helping, but..." He hesitated. "But..." "Well, people are growing impatient," Robert sighed. "Reports of robberies, looting, assaults, and even murder have taken over the news." Mira's eyes widened. "God. It's only been a month," she commented. "Are you and your family safe?" Robert nodded. "Mostly. We've heard shouts and complaints about people trying to break in, and we had someone banging on our door, but the second they heard my wife rack our 12-gauge shotgun, the banging stopped and they haven't been back," he added with a proud smile. Mira laughed. "Debbie has always been a bit fiery. How are you doing? I know you went to the mountains. Were you able to get home?" "No, but I'm doing well." She looked toward the chair where Lauren was seated, her head bent at an awkward angle as she dozed. Her heart melted a little. "I'm staying at my friend's cabin," she continued. "Since when do you have friends?" Robert teased, and for a moment both he and Mira let themselves pretend it was any other meeting. "And since when did you have a sense of humor?" she quipped. "And Lauren is..." She paused, not sure how to describe the other woman. "She made sure we had everything we needed," she finished. Although, well, if this storm doesn't stop soon and the temperatures rise, it's going to be close." Robert nodded but didn't want to dwell on the bleak possibilities. "So, I know we put the deadlines on hold, but have you been able to write any?" "Actually, yes," Mira replied, thinking of one more way Lauren had helped her. "In fact, I may be finished with this book by the time this disaster is over." Robert's eyes widened. "Really? It's amazing how much one can get done when not having to have meetings or deal with constant texts," she said dryly. Robert snorted. "Your sense of humor is as bad as mine," he commented. "Any plans for the next one?" Mira took a deep breath. She had been dreading this conversation. "Actually, this will be the last one." Robert's smile vanished. "What are you saying? This is the last book of the series?" "Yes, but also the last one with a publisher." "Mira, I don't understand. Are you unhappy? Did you find another publisher?" "No. It's nothing like that, Robert. You've been great, but over the last few weeks, I realized I liked working independently. No deadlines, no pressure. I want to keep that." "But..." "Robert, we can talk more about this when things are back to normal and we can meet face to face, but I wanted you to know I won't be renewing my contract. Not because of anything you've done or not done, but because I want to be independent. Maybe turn toward ebooks. We both know that's the direction the market's going." "I know, but still." "I know, and I'm sorry, Robert. But again, we can talk more later and perhaps we can reach an agreement. For now, I need to get back to work." Robert ran a hand over his face. "All right, Mira. I know you well enough to recognize when you've made up your mind, and I won't push you, but I do want to meet for lunch, once this bloody storm is over. We will. Stay safe, Mira said, then quickly ended the call. She decided that while she was at it, she would check the weather to see if the end of the storm was in sight. She had just connected to the local weather site when the page froze and then dropped entirely. She frowned and waited a moment, knowing that with the snow the satellite signal could be spotty, but nothing came back. There was no connection at all. Crap, she muttered. Lauren, who had just opened her eyes, pushed herself upright. Mira? She asked sleepily. The internet's out. Is the satellite out of range or something? Mira asked, only half teasing. I don't think it works that way, Lauren replied with a smile, already more alert. She got to her feet and checked the router. It was dark. She pressed the power button, then glanced toward the television and tried that as well. Nothing. Okay, she said with a quiet breath. Looks like the power station's out of charge. Before Mira could reply, her phone rang. She looked at the ID. Oh great, she muttered. Peter. Mira nodded, deciding if she wanted to answer. Go ahead, I'll go start the generator, Lauren encouraged. As Lauren went to put on her heavy coat, Mira connected the call. Hello Peter, she said, not even trying to disguise her impatience. Mira, thank God. You're okay. Of course I am. Why are you talking so quietly? I'm in my bedroom. I needed a few minutes away from the family. Why? I thought you were all about family togetherness. Isn't that why you invited them to my house without telling me? Yes, but, God, Mira, I had no idea how obnoxious they are. They're either complaining, demanding, or making stupid jokes nonstop. What about Vanessa? Mira drawled sarcastically. Isn't she comforting you through all of it? There was a long pause. About that. Mira, I messed up and I'm sorry. Vanessa, she's worse than the others. She's pushy and demanding and, well, she's nothing like you. Mira scoffed. Am I supposed to be flattered by that? No. That's not what I meant. Lauren entered the house just in time to see the dark expression crossing Mira's face. She quickly kicked off her boots and hung up her coat before stepping to the counter. Seeing Lauren beside her, Mira put the phone on speaker, wanting a witness to the stupidity she was about to hear. Look, Peter continued, I know I was wrong. I should have never started up with Vanessa, and I'm going to break up with her as soon as this damned storm ends. When you come back, we can start over and spend the rest of my leave together. Lauren looked at Mira, trying to gauge her reaction and relieved to see nothing but irritation and incredulous amusement. You can't be serious, Mira said, letting out a shocked laugh. I am serious, Peter said louder and then lowered his voice. I'm sorry for bringing her here and I'm sorry that I let my loneliness while I was away. Don't you dare try that tired excuse on me, Peter. You weren't lonely. You just forgot you were married. And didn't you invite her to my house with every intention of divorcing me for her? Suddenly, the memories she'd thought were long gone resurfaced, and the hold she had on her temper snapped. Didn't you have every intention of throwing me out into the blizzard so you could cozy up with her and your family? She spat. Lauren's breath caught as she saw Mira returning to the past, and she placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, reminding her that that day never happened. What are you talking about? Peter snapped. Yes, I brought her to the house, but I wasn't going to throw you out. The warm pressure on her shoulder had calmed her temper almost immediately. No? Then were you just planning for me to treat her as an honored guest? Yes, no, I don't know, Peter snapped, his patience breaking. I already said I made a mistake, Mira. I'm sorry. Just give me another chance. There is absolutely no way that will ever happen, Peter, she said with a cold finality. I have no tolerance for betrayal and there is no going back. When I do come back, it will only be to start divorce proceedings. What? No, Mira. I don't agree, Peter protested, panic setting into his voice. Too bad. I have evidence of your affair, so if we have to go to court to fight it out, I'm fine with that. I have all the time in the world. Mira, come on. My mind is made up. You've shown me exactly who you are, and that's not someone I have any interest in spending my life with. Peter scoffed. No, that would be your little maid, wouldn't it? He snarled. Mira's breath hitched, but she ignored it. Go back to your family, Peter. They can tolerate you better than I can. She disconnected before he could say anything else. For a moment, Mira stared at the phone, anger from both her past life and this one swirling inside her. She got to her feet and began to pace the living room, trying to steady her racing thoughts. Lauren didn't speak. She simply stood by, offering silent support as the anger and hurt gradually faded from Mira's eyes. Finally, Mira stopped pacing and took a slow, steady breath. The tension in her shoulders eased and the warm, gentle expression Lauren had come to recognize returned to her features. You okay? Mira looked up to see Lauren leaning casually against the counter, her gaze one of concern but not pity. Her presence alone was grounding to Mira in a way nothing else had been. I'm fine, Mira replied honestly. He actually thinks that because he's going to break up with Vanessa, I should just act like nothing happened, she added with a bitter chuckle. Of course he does, Lauren said. That's what cheaters do. It doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. They don't see cheating as wrong. It's just something to do when they're bored. And when they get caught, they expect the person they hurt to just get over it. Mira caught something in Lauren's expression, a flicker that disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared. Are you speaking from experience? She asked gently. Yeah. Lauren gave a small shrug. We weren't married, but I caught my boyfriend with another woman. His excuse was that she was more feminine, more romantic. When I asked him why he didn't just break up with me, he said he wanted to make sure they were compatible first. And keep you as a backup? Mira asked, incredulous. Pretty much. Mira studied her for a long moment, seeing everything her boyfriend had been too blind to recognize. He was a profoundly stupid man, she said softly. To her surprise, Lauren's eyes dropped, and the tips of her ears turned a faint, fascinating shade of pink. Mira felt a small smile tug at her lips, finding the reaction to be unexpectedly endearing. So, breakfast? Lauren asked, shaking off her embarrassment. Sure. With the tension finally easing, they moved into the kitchen. Lauren started the coffee pot while Mira pulled out what they needed, and together they put together a simple breakfast of tacos and hash browns. Once they were full, they took advantage of the restarted water heater and took short but revitalizing showers. Afterward, Mira returned to her laptop, choosing once again to stay at the large counter instead of heading to the lonely office. Lauren, meanwhile, headed to the power room, deciding it was as good a time as any to check the system for any adjustments she needed to make now or upgrades she could make later. After several minutes, a flood of ideas filled her mind, ways to incorporate new tools and technology that hadn't been available when she gave up her work 2 years earlier. A spark she had thought gone forever reignited, and she quickly went to fetch a notepad and pen before returning to the living room. For the next few hours, they worked separately, the cabin filled with a quiet, comfortable stillness. The low hum of the generator filled the background, steady and reassuring, while outside the wind had softened to little more than a faint whisper against the trees. For the first time in days, there was no urgency, no tension pressing in from every side. Mira sat at the counter, her attention on the screen but her posture relaxed, one hand loosely curled around her coffee. Every so often, her eyes drifted away from the laptop, drawn instead to the sight of Lauren leaning over the coffee table, pen moving quickly across the page, an air of excitement on her face as she worked. She was definitely curious about what had the other woman so focused, but instead of interrupting to ask, she simply smiled softly before returning to her manuscript. A sudden noise broke the silence, and both women looked up. The sound grew louder, a steady thump. 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 Mira's brow furrowed, her attention drifting fully from the screen. "Do you hear that?" she asked quietly. Lauren tilted her head, listening. The sound came again, louder now, more defined, and both women got to their feet. "Yeah. That's definitely not the wind." The distant thumping grew stronger, steady and rhythmic. It faded for a moment, leaving the air still enough that neither of them moved. Then it returned, louder this time, unmistakable. "It's a helicopter," Mira said, a note of confused excitement in her voice. "That's unexpected," Lauren replied. They pulled on their coats and boots and headed outside just as a military helicopter descended onto the space where the driveway lay buried under 3 feet of snow. They stood on the porch, watching as 2 heavily bundled soldiers stepped out of the helicopter, bending low beneath the still spinning rotors as they moved quickly toward them, snow whipping into thick, swirling clouds. "Are you all right?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice muffled by his scarf. "Yes," Mira replied. "Can we help you with something?" "We're actually here to ask you that," the other man said kindly. Lauren hesitated for a moment. Part of her weighed the risks of letting strangers in, but seeing the military helicopter and the 2 men standing in the cold, she chose to trust her instincts. "Why don't you come in and warm up?" she offered cautiously. "No, thank you, ma'am," the taller man said, catching the hint of wariness in both women's expressions. "So, I don't want to be rude, but we weren't expecting the army today," Lauren added. "I imagine not," the other man chuckled. "We understand you might be a bit anxious about our arrival." "A little," Mira admitted. "I'm Sergeant Jake Rivers, and this is Lieutenant Tim Walker. We're with the National Guard." "I'm Mira, and this is Lauren. What brings you out in this mess?" "Well, since the wind has died down, we were sent to check conditions in the mountains and see if anyone was still up here," Jake replied. "It looks like most of the houses in this area are empty," Tim added, "so we were surprised to see chimney smoke and wanted to make sure you were all right." "We're good," Lauren assured him, "for now anyway. This place was set up for winter weather, although this is a bit more winter than it's used to." "I imagine so," Tim said with a faint chuckle. "There are a few shelters set up in town. We can take you back with us, if you'd like." Lauren and Mira exchanged a look, both of them realizing they weren't ready to leave the peace they had found together. "We're okay here," Mira replied. "We'd rather let people who don't have heat take those beds." "Fair enough. Is there anything you need? Food? Water?" "To be honest, the only thing we're worried about is propane," Lauren said. "We're running the generator for now, but we're down to about 2 weeks' worth if we're careful." Tim nodded. "That should be enough. The snow is supposed to ease over the next couple of days, and crews are starting to work their way out here. Hopefully you'll be back on the grid within a week." "I hope so," Mira said. "How are things in town?" "Better," Jake replied, though his expression tightened slightly. "But the last couple of weeks haven't brought out the best in people." "What do you mean?" "Most of the gas stations and restaurants. They've all been looted. They tried the main grocery store, but the police had kept patrols on standby, knowing that would be the first place hit." "That figures," Lauren scoffed. "I get that people got desperate, but there were warnings weeks before the storm hit. Some people ignored them and now everyone else is paying for it." "True," Tim agreed, "but between us and the police, we've started patrolling as best we can." "We're certainly grateful for all of you," Mira said sincerely. "Fortunately, nobody has made it up here, yet." Jake gave a small nod. "And you're sure you want to stay up here?" "Yes," Mira replied without hesitation. "All right. If you're certain, we'll head out," Tim said. "Wait, at least let us get you some coffee and something to eat," Mira offered. Jake glanced at Tim, who gave a small nod. "You don't need to do that, Mom." "Yes, we do. Just give me a minute. I'll be right back." "I'll come with you," Lauren said, then looked at the 2 men. You'll still be here, right? Yes, Mom. Lauren smiled, and they headed inside. Mira quickly filled a thermos with coffee while Lauren gathered a few bags of snacks and jerky they could eat in the air. When they returned outside, they were surprised to find the men gone. Where'd they go? Mira asked. The helicopter's still there, so. Lauren paused, then looked off to the side. Oh. They're over by the solar panels. They made their way through the thick snow, stopping short when they saw the two men struggling to lift a fallen tree off the panels. With a final effort, the tree dropped to the ground with a dull thud. The men turned, spotting Lauren and Mira watching in surprise. I hope you don't mind, Jake said, slightly out of breath. We thought you might want that cleared. We don't mind at all, but you didn't need to, Lauren replied quickly. They weren't doing anything right now anyway. No, Tim said, brushing snow from his gloves, but the skies will clear sooner or later. Unfortunately, a couple of the panels are damaged, but the rest look fine. Thank you, Lauren said sincerely. She handed him the bags of food while Mira passed the thermos to Jake. Thank you, ladies, Jake said warmly. We'll check in on you in a few days. If you think of anything you need in the meantime, contact Camp Meridian and mention our names. They'll get the message to us. Thank you, Lauren said. She hesitated briefly. This might sound a little odd, but could you keep our presence here limited to those who need to know? The two men exchanged a brief glance, surprised but not questioning. Of course, Tim said. And Happy New Year, by the way. Lauren and Mira both froze, the realization hitting at once. Thank you, Lauren said. Happy New Year to you. Stay safe out there. They exchanged handshakes before the two men returned to the helicopter. Within moments, it lifted off, rising above the trees before disappearing into the distance. The sound faded, leaving the quiet behind once more. Well, Lauren said at last. That was something. Mira let out a soft snort. It definitely broke the monotony. They headed back inside and instead of returning to what they had been doing, they went to turn on the television, wanting to get a clearer picture of what was happening in town. They pulled up the local news and listened as reporters spoke about supply shortages, attempted break-ins, and the strain the storm had placed on the town. Their small community had never seen anything like it. But alongside the grim reports was something else, something that showed humanity still existed. They spoke of emergency crews working around the clock in sub-zero temperatures to ensure the safety of citizens, while first responders and the National Guard continued patrols to maintain order. The weather forecast itself lifted their spirits slightly. The snow and wind were finally easing, though the cold remained dangerously low. Snow plows and utility crews had begun pushing out from the city into the mountains, and if conditions held, power might be fully restored within the next 2 weeks. Thank God, Mira sighed, turning off the television. Yes, it looks like there's finally a light at the end of this freezing tunnel, Lauren said with a small smile. Yes, but I'm pretty sure we'll be the last to get power back. Most likely. Lauren frowned. I wish I had thought to get a drone or two so we could check the roads and see what things look like going down the mountain. Mira patted her thigh fondly. You did more than enough, she said sincerely. We're alive, warm, and probably 10 pounds heavier because of you. Nothing else matters. Lauren's eyes dropped to her lap. It wasn't just me. And as for the other, it was your love of chocolate that made us gain 10 pounds, she added. Mira chuckled. You're a bully. But not wrong, she admitted. Lauren laughed. And I'm not complaining. Mira caught sight of the notepad on the coffee table, filled with neat writing and small diagrams, and remembered how focused Lauren had been earlier. Did you decide to write a book? She asked with a smile, nodding toward the notepad. Lauren laughed. No. I'll leave the creativity to you. So what were you doing? Lauren glanced away, unsure of Mira's reaction. I was just thinking about some updates I could make to the systems here. Once spring comes. Both women had the same thought, if it comes, but neither wanted to darken the relaxed mood. Mira noticed a spark in Lauren's eyes she hadn't seen before and remembered what Lauren had said about losing her drive after her parents died. She considered asking more, but decided that was a conversation for another time. If those updates include a hot tub and a gym, I may move in, Mira teased. Lauren met her gaze, an idea beginning to form, though she wasn't ready to voice it. I'll keep that in mind, she replied with a grin. Mira's smile faded as she considered what that notepad represented. What does this mean? She asked seriously. Lauren sat back on the sofa, looking at her notes. It means I missed this, she admitted, picking up her notes. I missed the analyzing, the planning, the designing of systems that can change how people live. I didn't realize how much until now. Really? Lauren, that's great, Mira said sincerely. Lauren offered a small, uncertain smile. Yeah. I know why you stepped away, Mira replied softly. And even though I didn't know your parents, from what you've told me, I'm sure they wouldn't have wanted you to give up something you love for so long because of grief. Lauren swallowed, tears stinging her eyes as she thought about the people who had supported her, even when others dismissed her passions. I know. She paused, then gave a soft chuckle. What? Mira asked with a gentle smile. I was just thinking. Maybe this ridiculous storm and our rebirth was their way of giving me a silent kick in the ass. Mira's eyes widened, then she found herself laughing. That's an interesting way to look at it, she said. And maybe my parents teamed up with yours because they wanted me to finally open my eyes and see who Peter really is. Lauren met Mira's eyes. As weird as this whole thing has been, who else could have seen what happened to you and not make sure you had another chance to live and get away from that awful family? Mira's smile faded and she took Lauren's hand. It wasn't just me, Lauren. You suffered because you chose to protect me. Whoever made this happen, I believe it was because you were willing to risk your life to protect a woman you barely knew. And I will always be grateful. For the second chance, but even more for the day you answered my ad. Lauren's eyes stung and she squeezed Mira's hand. Me too, she said and then cleared her throat. So, it's New Year's Eve, she said softly. Yes. I'd actually forgotten what day it was, Mira replied. The realization hit her all at once and her breath caught in her throat as memories surged forward. The darkness, the empty pantry. The suffocating silence. The ice. And finally, the faint, barely perceptible sensation of an icy cold hand clasping hers. Then the whisper, the last words she heard in that lifetime. Happy New Year, Mira. Lauren frowned, her expression tightening as she noticed the sudden paleness in Mira's face. Mira? Mira blinked, pulling herself back to the present. She looked at Lauren, seeing that familiar protective concern in her eyes. Sorry, It was New Year's Eve when we... She couldn't finish. Was it? Lauren's voice softened as her own memories stirred. By the end of that life, she hadn't known anything except the woman beside her. But things were different now. She straightened her posture and offered a reassuring smile. That was then, Mira. This is now. This time, New Year's will mean what it was always supposed to mean. Mira saw the spark of determination in Lauren's eyes and found it contagious. Which is? It means a new start for both of us, Lauren said with a smile. Now. No more thinking about before. Today we're not going to do anything except enjoy this second chance. Mira's lips lifted. I take it you have a plan. Of course I do. Lauren grinned. We're going to eat everything that sounds good, sit in front of the television, and watch as many cartoons as we can tolerate. Then later, we drink beer until we pass out in front of the TV. Mira couldn't help but laugh at Lauren's enthusiasm. Will we be able to move in the morning? Maybe, maybe not, but we'll definitely wake up, Lauren said firmly. And when we do, We'll deal with the hangovers and start figuring out everything the new year has in store for us. Mira looked at the woman who had saved her in 2 lifetimes and squeezed her hand. I can't think of a better way to spend the day, she said sincerely. Great. Well then, it's still early. I should go check the vents and bring in some more wood. Want to join me? Sure. If we're going to be stuffing our faces all day, we may as well get some exercise first, Mira agreed. Even the thought of stepping out into the 20 below temperatures wasn't enough to dampen the lightness in her heart. As they went to put on their coats, she paused and looked at Lauren. No chimney, she said firmly. Lauren gave a small salute. Yes, Miss Mira, she said, then chuckled as Mira swatted her arm, and they headed outside. Lauren had just finished placing the last log onto the sled when she felt something hit the back of her head. A burst of laughter broke the silence. She spun around to see Mira standing there, a fresh snowball in her hand, already poised to throw another. Are you kidding me? Lauren asked, surprised. She straightened, a grin tugging at her lips beneath the scarf. Mira's smile faltered slightly, uncertainty flickering across her face. It slipped? She offered. Oh? You mean like this? Before Mira could react, Lauren scooped up a handful of snow, packed it quickly, and threw it straight back at her, hitting her square in the forehead. Mira's sputtering had Lauren laughing out loud, and for a moment, they ignored the brutal cold as they fell into a brief but fierce snowball fight. When it ended, they impulsively built a faceless snowman before finally stacking the wood and returning inside. The rest of the day was exactly what Lauren had wanted. Neither of them turned to work. They ate an early lunch, keeping it simple with chicken noodle soup since they knew they'd be snacking for the rest of the day. They decided to skip television for a while and played a game of Yahtzee, followed by Monopoly, where each took turns accusing the other of cheating. During the game, Mira took the opportunity to ask Lauren about the upgrades she wanted to make. Lauren launched into an explanation, and Mira quickly realized she only understood about every other word. Still, the excitement lighting Lauren's features was enough to hold her interest, and she often interrupted to ask her to explain one of the more interesting upgrades. By the time evening began to fall, they decided to make a pizza. As Mira slid it into the oven, Lauren's eyes drifted to Mira's laptop. So, while that's cooking, do you want to see how your dear in-laws are spending New Year's Eve? She asked with a grin. Sure, Mira agreed happily. After Peter's call, I get the feeling they aren't reveling with champagne and party hats. Lauren imagined the grouchy Frank sitting on the couch with a pointy hat and noisemaker, and she couldn't hold back a laugh. Mira signed into the surveillance system, and after a few seconds of buffering, the image flickered to life. Predictably, they were all gathered in the living room, looking miserable. No one wore coats, and the low murmur of the television filled the space, confirming the power was still on. They sat facing it, their attention fixed forward, completely unaware that they were being watched. Paper plates rested in their laps, each of them eating sandwiches with little enthusiasm. What happened to the football games? Brad muttered, shifting on the couch. Is he really that stupid? Lauren asked incredulously. Apparently so, Mira snorted. There's a blizzard everywhere, Brad, Peter pointed out dryly. Mira's eyes widened. Is it just me, or does Brad have a black eye? Lauren leaned closer to the screen. He does. Any guesses? Mira smirked. I'd put my money on Pam. Lauren let out a quiet laugh, and they kept watching. For once, Vanessa wasn't draped all over Peter. Instead, she sat in an armchair apart from the others, glaring at him whenever she wasn't looking at her phone. Well, it looks like the honeymoon is over, Lauren commented. Not surprising. Relationships built on the back of someone else never last, Mira replied, surprised to find she didn't feel even a hint of bitterness. The words coming from the television suddenly drew their attention. Conditions are expected to improve overnight, with snowfall tapering off completely by morning. The local grocery store will reopen tomorrow at 10 a.m. for limited hours. Due to reduced inventory, only a set number of customers will be allowed inside at a time, and purchase limits will be enforced. However, supply distribution will also continue for the next several days. The reaction was immediate. Complaints and sandwiches were forgotten as they all began talking excitedly over one another. Mira turned off the feed and shut her laptop. "Well, that should be fun," she said dryly. "Hopefully the other supply options will keep it from getting too crazy." "I'm just glad that store is still around to open," Lauren added. "What do you mean?" "Based on reports from other places, I would have expected them to have been ransacked by now." "True. The police officers who were out patrolling during all of this definitely deserve a raise," Mira agreed. The sound of a timer and the smell of cooked mozzarella drew their attention. "Finally," Lauren said, rubbing her stomach. A few minutes later, they settled onto the sofa with full plates and beer and turned on the local news. It didn't take long to realize they weren't missing anything. The broadcast repeated the same updates they had already heard, looping through footage of plows, closed roads, and reporters bundled against the cold. Still, the tone had shifted. The worst of the storm was over. Mira let out a small breath, leaning back into the cushions. "It's almost over," she said. "Yeah," Lauren agreed. "Even if it doesn't change much for us yet." Mira glanced over at her, a faint smile forming. "I think I'm okay with that." Lauren smiled back. "Me too. So, time for cartoons?" Mira laughed. "Of course. I'd hate to have you pouting the rest of the night." Lauren made a face and they turned their attention to spending the rest of the night in mindless entertainment. They didn't drink themselves into passing out. Instead, after a couple of beers, they switched to cocoa. When they began yawning, they decided that the new year would come whether they were awake or not and decided to go to bed. After cleaning the kitchen, they both got ready for bed. Almost instinctively they chose not to put the mattress back in Lauren's room, as if something pushed them to reclaim what their past life had stolen. They climbed under the blanket, keeping the television on. The wood stove had burned out, leaving the television as the only source of light, its soft glow flickering across the room. As Mira drifted into sleep, she felt Lauren's hand slip into hers, just like before. But unlike before, the hand was warm, and Lauren's words weren't a weak whisper, but a steady, certain wish. "Happy New Year, Mira." Mira squeezed her hand, her heart full as she finally answered. "Happy New Year, Lauren."